The scent of power and imported liquor always preceded Do-hyun Lee. The Chicago night pressed against the windows of Aurelius, the kind of restaurant where silence cost more than noise. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen starbursts above tables set with silverware that caught light like tiny blades. Conversation moved in whispers, deals sealed with handshakes the cameras would never see. Nia Jefferson moved through the dining room like water finding its path. Her white button-up shirt was pressed sharp, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek low ponytail that emphasized the clean lines of her face. At 26, she'd perfected the art of being everywhere and nowhere at once. A necessary skill when you worked in a place where Chicago's dangerous came to pretend they were legitimate. She refilled wine glasses, cleared plates with hands that never trembled, kept her expression neutral though she cataloged everything. The CEO sweating through his collar. The politician whose voting record didn't match his dinner companions. The lawyer who specialized in cases that disappeared. More water, sir? The businessman barely acknowledged her. Of course. Nia poured with practiced precision, feeling the weight in the air shift. Tonight carried something electric, dangerous. Like the moment before thunder splits the sky wide open. Across the room, Do-hyun Lee owned the space near the corner table. At 30, he didn't need to raise his voice. Authority radiated from him like heat from pavement in summer. Tall, sharp-featured, his black tailored suit fit like a second skin. The tattoo climbing his neck caught candlelight, the ink seeming to breathe with each movement. His businesses were legitimate on paper. Import-export, real estate development, private security. But Nia knew what everyone in this room knew. Do-hyun Lee's real empire was built in shadows where law enforcement couldn't follow. Korean syndicates, protection networks, territory claimed with blood and silence that buried bodies. She'd worked at Aurelius for 18 months. Just another server in black and white. She needed this job, needed the paychecks that kept her studio apartment warm, needed to remain invisible in a city where curiosity got people erased from existence. But tonight, invisibility was about to become impossible.
Nia.
Marcus, the floor manager, materialized at her shoulder. His voice carried tension she'd never heard before. Table 12 needs service.
Now.
Table 12. The corner table. Do-hyun Lee's table. He asked for me specifically. Marcus's jaw tightened. He asked for you by name. I don't know how he knows it, but he does.
Go.
Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless he speaks to you first. And for God's sake, don't do anything that gets us all killed. Nia's pulse hammered against her throat. She picked up water and menus with hands that wanted to shake, but wouldn't allow it. She approached with her server's mask firmly in place. Pleasant, neutral, forgettable. Do-hyun Lee sat surrounded by 3 men in dark suits, all Korean, all watching her with the kind of attention that made her spine prickle with warning. He didn't acknowledge her presence. Just continued speaking to the man on his right in rapid, dismissive Korean, his voice carrying the cold certainty of someone who'd never been challenged. Look at this woman, like a dog waiting for its master. His men laughed. Sharp, knowing. Something ancient and furious ignited in Nia's chest. She'd spent 12 years running from her father's world. From the Korean he'd taught her at their cramped kitchen table while her mother worked double shifts. From the blood that stained her last memories of him. From everything she'd tried to bury so deep it couldn't claw its way back up. She set down the menu. Looked directly into Do-hyun Lee's eyes, a violation of every survival rule she'd learned in this city. In perfect native Busan Korean, with the rough accent of dock workers and market vendors, she spoke 3 words that sliced through the room like a blade through silk. Keenan, isn't the dog you? The restaurant went cold. Every conversation stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Du Hyun-lee's glass slipped from his fingers, water spreading across white linen like blood across snow. Nia didn't flinch. You think you can insult me because I'm black? Because I serve food. She kept speaking Korean, each word precise as a surgical cut. I understood every syllable. And I'm telling you now, the only dog in this restaurant is the one who tears others down to feel powerful. The silence was suffocating,
Crushing.
every eye in the room watched the collision of two worlds that should never have touched. Du Hyun-lee stood slowly, unfolding to his full height, towering over her. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kill her right there. His hand moved toward his jacket. She saw the outline of something hard and metallic. Instead, he smiled.
Cold. Predatory.
Fascinated. What's your name? You already know it. His smile widened fractionally. Nia Jefferson. He leaned in close enough that she could smell expensive whiskey and something darker beneath. Gunpowder, perhaps, or blood that never quite washes clean. You just made the most dangerous mistake of your life. He threw $500 bills on the table and walked out, his men scrambling to follow. Marcus appeared instantly, face drained of color. Pack your things. You're fired. Do you understand what you just did? But Nia was watching Du Hyun-lee's retreating figure, watching how he paused at the door, turned back once, his eyes finding hers across the crowded restaurant with surgical precision. Something in her gut told her this was far from over. She'd just confronted a Mafia boss in his native tongue, called him a dog in front of his men, shattered every rule that kept people like her alive in this city. Why had she done it? Because some insults you swallow, and some you answer, even when answering might cost you everything. Especially then. Before we dive deeper into this story, take a moment to hit that like button if you love suspenseful, emotional stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next thrilling chapter. We also want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Whether it's your city, your country, or even just your favorite spot to watch these stories, we love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's get back to the story and see just how far courage can take someone when danger is closing in. Du Hyun-lee couldn't sleep. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, Chicago's skyline glittering below like diamonds scattered across black velvet. 3 a.m, and the city still breathed, still moved, still pulsed with life. But all he could see was her face. The waitress who'd looked him in the eye. The woman who'd called him a dog in perfect Busan Korean, not textbook Korean, not Seoul Korean, but the rough dialect of his grandmother's neighborhood. The accent his father had beaten out of him when they'd immigrated. The accent he still dreamed in. He pressed his palm against cold glass, trying to ground himself in something real. His reflection stared back, dragon tattoo dark against his neck, eyes shadowed with something he refused to name. Obsession. It had been 4 days since Aurelius. 4 days since she'd shattered the rules of his world with 3 words. He'd replayed the moment 1,000 times. The way her spine had straightened. The controlled fury blazing in her dark eyes. The accent that belonged to his childhood, to streets an ocean away, to a world he'd left behind in blood and violence. How did a black woman in Chicago speak like she'd been raised in Busan's poorest districts? Behind him, Min-jun, his tech specialist, cleared his throat. The younger man looked exhausted, circles under his eyes from days of digging. Boss, I have the report. Du Hyun didn't turn from the window. Tell me. Nia Jefferson, 26. Born in Atlanta. Mother deceased, cancer, 13 years ago. Entered Chicago foster care at age 13. Father listed as unknown on the birth certificate. Min-jun paused. Her employment history is clean. 2 restaurant jobs before Aurelius. No criminal record, no debt, no gang connections. She's invisible. No one is invisible. Do-hyun's voice was ice. Keep going. That's the problem, boss. Before age 13, there's nothing. No school records in Atlanta. No medical files. No photographs. It's like she didn't exist until she appeared in Chicago's foster system. Do-hyun turned slowly. Foster system. Her mother was dying. Couldn't care for her anymore. Nia spent 5 years in state care before aging out. Worked her way through community college. Kept her head down. Never caused trouble. Minjun hesitated. It's too clean. People who hide this well are either running from something or protecting something. Or both. Do-hyun moved to his desk where Minjun had laid out everything they could find. Printed documents, photographs, timelines. Everything about a woman who'd made herself disappear. He picked up her employee photo from Aurelius. She was beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention. Smooth dark skin, intelligent eyes, mouth set in a line that suggested she'd learned early to swallow words that might kill her. But it was her eyes that held him. Even in this staged photo, there was defiance. Fire banked but not extinguished. The Korean, Do-hyun said quietly. Where did she learn it? That's what I can't figure out. No language classes. No travel to Korea. No Korean foster families. No connection anywhere. Minjun pulled up a recording on his phone. But I had someone at the restaurant that night. They captured audio. He pressed play. Nia's voice filled the penthouse, speaking Korean with the precise intonation of Busan's dock districts. The accent his father had forbidden. The accent that marked you as low class, as someone who would never matter in Seoul's power circles. Do-hyun closed his eyes. It wasn't just fluent. It was native. It was real. Someone taught her, he said. Someone who lived in Busan. Who spoke it at home, not in a classroom. Someone who wanted her to remember. But who? Her mother was American. Father unknown. There's no connection. A black woman with perfect Busan Korean. A father erased from every record. A childhood that doesn't exist before 13. Do-hyun opened his eyes, mind racing through possibilities. She's protecting someone's memory. Or hiding from it. Minjun shifted uncomfortably. Boss, should I keep digging? She's just a waitress. You could forget about her. Move on. Could I? Do-hyun's laugh was bitter. He picked up the photograph again, studying the face that had invaded every quiet moment. Tell me, Minjun, in all your years working for me, have you ever seen anyone look me in the eye and challenge me? No, boss. Have you ever heard anyone outside our organization speak Busan Korean in this city? No, boss. Then explain to me how I'm supposed to forget the woman who did both. He set the photo down with surgical precision. Find out everything. I want to know who her father was. I want to know why a 13-year-old girl appeared in Chicago with no past. And I want to know who loved her enough to teach her a language that would keep her connected to a world she should never have known. Minjun nodded, already pulling out his phone. Do-hyun turned back to the window, to the city that never stopped moving, and felt something shift in his chest. Something dangerous and inevitable. He was going to find Nia Jefferson. He was going to uncover every secret she'd buried. And he had the terrible feeling that when he did, nothing in his carefully constructed empire would ever be the same. The black van had no plates. Nia noticed that detail in the half-second before the door slid open and hands grabbed her arms. She'd been walking home from the grocery store, 3 blocks from her apartment, canvas bag heavy with vegetables she'd never get to cook. She didn't scream. Screaming in this neighborhood brought curtains closing, not help arriving. They pulled a hood over her head, expensive fabric, not the rough burlap of common thugs. The van smelled like leather and gun oil. Professional. Organized. She counted turns, tried to track time, but fear made seconds elastic and useless. When the hood came off, she was standing in a penthouse that belonged in architecture magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Chicago like a painting. Marble floors reflected light from fixtures that cost more than her yearly salary. The furniture was minimalist, brutal in its precision, all sharp angles and expensive restraint. Do-hyun Lee stood by the windows, hands in his pockets, watching the city below. He didn't turn when his men pushed her inside. Didn't acknowledge her presence for a long moment that stretched like wire pulled to breaking. "Leave us." His men disappeared like smoke. The door clicked shut with the finality of a vault ceiling. Nia's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her spine straight, her face blank. She'd learned young that showing fear was the same as bleeding in shark-filled water. "You know why you're here." Do-hyun turned finally, and his eyes were different than they'd been at the restaurant. Colder. More dangerous. A man who'd removed his public mask. Kidnapping. Nia's voice came out steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. "Should I list the felonies, or do you keep count yourself?" His smile was razor-thin. Still brave. Even here. Even now. He moved toward her with the controlled grace of something predatory. But bravery without power is just another word for stupid. "Then I guess we're both stupid. You brought me here. I brought you here because you're a mystery." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "And I don't allow mysteries to exist in my city. So you're going to tell me who taught you Busan Korean. You're going to tell me who your father was. And you're going to tell me why a black woman in Chicago speaks like she grew up in the poorest district of a city she's never seen." Nia's jaw tightened. The grocery bag lay abandoned in some alley. Her apartment door unlocked. Her phone probably shattered on the sidewalk where they'd grabbed her. She had no leverage, no weapons, no way out except through the truth. "My father." The words felt like glass, leaving her throat. "His name was Daniel Jefferson. He taught me." Daniel Jefferson. Do-hyun repeated the name slowly, tasting it. American name. How did an American man speak Busan dialect? He wasn't American. Nia met his eyes, refusing to look away. Not originally. His real name was Dae-young. He changed it when he came to the States. Before I was born. Something flickered across Do-hyun's face. Recognition, maybe, or the ghost of memory. Dae-young what? "I don't know. He never told me. Said his family name died with the man he used to be." She swallowed hard. "He taught me Korean because he said forgetting where you come from is the same as dying twice. Once in body, once in memory." "Where is he now?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm.
Dead.
Nia's voice went flat, emotionless. The only way she could say it without breaking. "He died when I was 13. That's when I went into foster care. That's when my old life ended, and this one began." Do-hyun studied her face with the intensity of someone reading a contract for hidden clauses. "How did he die? Does it matter?" "Everything matters." His voice dropped to something almost gentle, which somehow made him more terrifying. "Every detail, every connection, every secret. Because I think your father and I knew each other, Nia Jefferson. I think his death and your survival are connected to my world in ways you don't even understand yet." He turned back to the windows, silhouette dark against the glittering city. "So you're going to stay here until I figure out exactly who your father was. And why his ghost just walked into my restaurant wearing your face." 3 days passed like water dripping on stone, slow, relentless, wearing everything down to edges. Nia had a bedroom with a lock on the outside, a bathroom with no windows, access to a kitchen stocked with food she had no appetite to eat. The penthouse was a gilded cage, beautiful and suffocating in equal measure. Do-hyun came and went like a ghost. Sometimes she'd hear him on the phone in Korean, his voice cold and clipped, issuing orders that probably ended in blood. Sometimes she'd wake at 3 a.m. to find him standing at those massive windows, silhouette dark against the city lights, watching something she couldn't see. He asked questions. She gave answers that revealed nothing. A dance of words where neither partner would yield. Why did your father leave Korea? I don't know. What did he do for work? Construction.
Odd jobs.
Whatever kept us fed. Did he have enemies? Everyone has enemies. Her defiance was the only power she had left, and she wielded it like a blade. She wouldn't break, wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. She'd survived foster care, survived invisibility, survived a city that ate people like her for breakfast. She could survive him. Until the night he came home bleeding. The door slammed open near midnight. Nia jerked awake to the sound of heavy breathing, a body hitting the wall. She emerged from her room to find Do-hyun leaning against the entryway, one hand pressed to his side, blood seeping between his fingers and dripping onto marble that had never known violence before. His face was pale, jaw clenched against pain. His shirt was shredded, revealing a gash that ran from his ribs to his hip, deep, angry, still bleeding. Get out. His voice was strained. Go back to your room. Nia didn't move. She saw her father in that moment, stumbling through their apartment door when she was 9, hand pressed to a knife wound, telling her in Korean to get the kit, to be quick, to be brave. She moved to the kitchen, pulled open drawers until she found dish towels, grabbed the expensive whiskey from the bar, searched cabinets until she located a first aid kit that looked untouched. I said get out. Do-hyun had slid down the wall, sitting now, his control slipping with the blood loss. Shut up. Nia knelt beside him, her hands already moving with muscle memory her father had burned into her. You're going to pass out if you don't let me help. Why would you help me? His eyes were fever bright, suspicious even now. I'm keeping you prisoner. Because if you die, I don't know what happens to me. And because... She pressed a towel hard against the wound, making him hiss through his teeth. Because my father taught me that you don't let people bleed out. Not even monsters. She worked in silence after that. Cleaned the wound with whiskey that made him go rigid with pain. Used butterfly bandages to pull the edges together because it needed stitches he wouldn't go to a hospital to get. Wrapped his torso with gauze and surgical tape, her fingers steady even as his blood soaked into her skin. When she finished, they sat on the floor together, both marked by violence that wasn't theirs to claim. Your father taught you this. It wasn't a question. He said everyone should know how to stop bleeding. His own or someone else's. Do-hyun's laugh was bitter, pained. Practical man. Haunted man. Nia's voice went soft. He had scars everywhere. Cigarette burns on his arms. Knife wounds on his back. He never told me where they came from, but I knew. You don't get marked like that from construction accidents. Do-hyun looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or the terrible understanding of shared ghosts. He told me once that monsters aren't born. Nia met his gaze. They're made. Men who forget they could be anything else. Men who stop believing there's a way out of the violence. The words hung between them like a confession neither had asked for. And what am I? Do-hyun's voice was barely a whisper. In your father's philosophy. What does that make me? Nia stood, her hands still stained with his blood, and looked down at the man who'd kidnapped her, who held her captive, who was bleeding out in a penthouse that money couldn't protect. I don't know yet, but you're still asking the question. That means something. She walked back to her room and closed the door, leaving him sitting in the wreckage of his own violence, wondering if forgetting you're a monster was the same as remembering you're a man. The photograph arrived at dawn. Do-hyun stood in his office, ribs still aching beneath fresh bandages, staring at the image Min-jun had placed on his desk. The paper felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. A little girl, maybe 9 or 10, with bright eyes and braided hair, sitting on a man's shoulders. She was laughing, caught mid-joy, hands gripping his head for balance. Behind them, a park, American ordinary safe. The man's face was turned slightly toward the camera, smiling in a way that suggested he didn't smile often but couldn't help it in that moment. Do-hyun knew that face. He'd seen it pale with fear. Seen it bruised and bleeding. Seen it go slack when the bullet entered his skull 7 years ago in a warehouse that smelled like rust and betrayal. Where did you find this? His voice came out strangled, wrong. Min-jun shifted uncomfortably. Deep web search. Recovered from an old social media account, deleted years ago. The metadata says it was taken in Atlanta, 13 years back. He paused. Boss, is that Dae-young Kim? Do-hyun's hands shook. He pressed them flat against the desk to stop the tremor. The traitor. The one who stole $2 million from the organization and disappeared. You killed him. I executed him. The correction was automatic, cold. On my father's orders. It was my first official kill. Proof of loyalty. Proof I could do what was necessary. Min-jun's face went carefully neutral. And the girl in the photo is Nia. Do-hyun picked up the photograph with hands that wanted to crush it, burn it, make it stop existing. Dae-young Kim's daughter. The traitor's daughter. The room tilted. 7 years ago, he'd killed a man begging in Korean, pleading about a daughter, about protection, about innocence. Do-hyun had pulled the trigger anyway, because that's what soldiers did. That's what sons did when fathers commanded. He'd never asked about the daughter. Never wondered what happened to the child of a traitor. In his world, bloodlines ended with bullets, and asking questions was the same as showing weakness. Get out. Min-jun left quickly, quietly, smart enough to recognize the edge of violence in Do-hyun's voice. Do-hyun stood alone with the photograph and the ghost of a man he'd murdered. The little girl's laughter seemed to echo in the silence, accusing him of something he couldn't name. He found Nia in the kitchen, making coffee, like she lived here by choice instead of force. She looked up when he entered, and something in his face made her go still. You knew. He threw the photograph on the counter between them. You knew who I was the moment you saw me. Nia looked down at the picture. Her face didn't change, but her hands tightened around the coffee cup until her knuckles went pale. Yes. How long have you known? Since I was 13. Her voice was steady, cold. Since the day 2 men came to our apartment and told me my father was dead. Since the day they gave me an envelope with enough money to survive and a warning to disappear. Since the day I learned that Daniel Jefferson Dae-young Kim died because of the Lee family. Do-hyun felt something crack inside his chest. I killed him. I know. She met his eyes, and there was no fear there. Only the terrible certainty of someone who'd lived with this knowledge for years. I saw you once. At his funeral. You stood in the back, watching. Making sure he stayed dead. Making sure no one asked questions. Then why? His voice broke. Why did you speak to me in the restaurant? Why reveal yourself? You could have stayed invisible. I would never have known. Because you insulted me. Her laugh was bitter, sharp. Because after 7 years of hiding, of swallowing words, of making myself invisible, You called me a dog. And I was so tired of being afraid of you. You should be afraid. He moved closer and she didn't flinch. Your father was a traitor. He stole from my family. He was protecting me. Nia's voice rose, cracking with years of buried fury. From your family. From the business they wanted to pull him back into.
He stole that money to buy our way out.
To give me a chance at a normal life. He was a thief. He was a father. She slammed the cup down, coffee sloshing onto pristine counters. A father who taught me Korean, so I'd never forget where he came from. Who taught me to stop bleeding because he knew what world he lived in. Who died with your name on his lips, begging you to let his daughter go. The words hit like bullets. Do-hyun remembered the warehouse, remembered the begging, remembered pulling the trigger anyway because his father had stood behind him, watching, judging, measuring his worth by his willingness to kill. He said, Do-hyun's voice was barely a whisper. He said something about a daughter, about innocence. I thought he was lying, playing for sympathy. He was telling the truth. Nia's eyes glittered with unshed tears she refused to let fall. And you killed him anyway. So yes, I knew who you were. I've always known. And I still helped you when you came home bleeding because her voice broke. Because my father taught me that the cycle only ends when someone chooses to break it. Silence crashed between them like a wave, drowning everything in its wake. Do-hyun looked at the photograph again. The little girl who'd lost her father to his bullet. The man who'd died begging for mercy Do-hyun hadn't given. The invisible waitress who'd carried this secret like a knife pressed against her own throat, waiting for the moment to strike or surrender. Why didn't you kill me? He asked quietly. When I was bleeding, you could have let me die. Could have run. Could have finally gotten revenge. Nia looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death to celebrate more. Because revenge is just another word for becoming the thing you hate. And I promised my father I'd be better than the world that killed him. She walked past him, shoulder brushing his, leaving him alone with ghosts and photographs and the terrible weight of a murder he could never undo. Do-hyun stood in the kitchen that smelled like coffee and accusations, holding the picture of a dead man and his laughing daughter, and felt the first crack in the armor he'd worn since he was old enough to hold a gun. He'd killed her father. She'd saved his life anyway. And somewhere in that impossible contradiction lay a truth he wasn't ready to face. The key was small, ordinary, the kind that opened 1,000 identical locks across the city. Nia pulled it from a chain around her neck she'd worn for 7 years, hidden beneath shirts and silence. He gave this to me the night before he died. Her voice was flat, drained of emotion. Said if anything happened to him, I should wait until I was old enough to understand. Then open what he'd left behind. Do-hyun took the key, and it felt like accepting a loaded gun. You never opened it?
Once.
When I was 16. I didn't understand what I was looking at. Just papers and files and evidence of things I couldn't process. She met his eyes. But you'll understand. You'll know exactly what he died for. The storage facility sat on the south side, anonymous and industrial. Rows of identical orange doors stretched like tombstones in a geometric graveyard. Unit 247 was small, unremarkable, covered in dust that spoke of years untouched. Do-hyun's hands shook as he unlocked it. The door rolled up with a metallic shriek that sounded like a scream. Inside was a table, a folding chair, and 3 boxes marked with dates in his father's handwriting. Nia didn't enter, just stood in the doorway, backlit by fluorescent lights, watching him discover what she'd lived with alone. The first box held financial records. Ledgers in Korean, transactions coded but clear if you knew how to read them. Money moving through shell companies, payments marked with women's names, amounts that made Du Hyun's stomach turn. And there, in his brother's handwriting, Min-ho Lee's signature on transfer after transfer. What is this? But he already knew. His hands moved through papers that felt contaminated. Keep looking. Nia's voice was hollow. The second box held photographs. Women's faces, some defiant, some terrified, all marked with ID numbers like livestock. Shipping manifests. Warehouse locations. A network spanning from Busan to Chicago, built on bodies and silence. And his brother's name on every document. Du Hyun's vision blurred. Min-ho, his older brother. The one who died in a car accident 5 years ago. The golden son who could do no wrong. The heir their father had groomed for leadership. He was trafficking women. Du Hyun's voice didn't sound like his own. My brother was running a trafficking ring. Your whole family knew. Nia stepped into the unit now, her presence solid and accusing. Your father, your uncles, the entire organization. They called it import business. Clean words for dirty work. The third box held a letter, handwritten in Korean on paper yellowed with age, addressed to his daughter. Du Hyun's hands trembled as he unfolded it. My dearest Nia, if you're reading this, I'm gone.
I'm sorry.
I wanted to give you a normal life, but my past caught up with me, as I always knew it would. I was part of the Lee organization for 15 years. I helped them build their empire in America. I did terrible things. Things I can never take back. Things that wake me at night screaming. But when I discovered what Min-ho Lee was doing, when I found the women locked in that warehouse, some younger than you are now, I couldn't look away anymore. I couldn't pretend the money we made was clean. I stole $2 million from them.
But I didn't keep it for myself. I used it to get those women out.
18 women. I bought them papers, bus tickets, new identities. I gave them the chance I never had, the chance to disappear and start over. The Lee family called me a traitor. They're right. I betrayed them. I betrayed everything I'd built. And I'd do it again. If they find me, when they find me, they'll send someone to execute me. Probably young Du Hyun. The old man is grooming him to take over. Training him to kill without hesitation. Without mercy. I don't blame the boy. He's a victim too in his own way. A weapon shaped by his father's hands. But Nia, my beautiful daughter, I need you to know, I died trying to be better than the monster I was. I died trying to save people instead of destroy them. The evidence in these boxes proves what the Lee family really is. One day, when you're strong enough, use it. Burn down their empire. Free the women still trapped in their system. Or don't. Just survive.
Just be happy.
Just be the good thing I managed to create in all my years of darkness. I love you more than all the Korean words I ever taught you. Your father, Dae-young Kim. The letter slipped from Du Hyun's fingers, falling to the concrete floor like a bird shot from the sky. He saved 18 women. Nia's voice cracked. And your family hunted him down like an animal. They sent you, a 23-year-old kid who didn't know any better, to murder a hero. Du Hyun couldn't breathe. The storage unit walls pressed in, suffocating. His entire life had been built on lies his father told. Every lesson about loyalty, about strength, about doing what was necessary, all of it contaminated by the truth rotting in these boxes. I didn't know. The words were ash in his mouth. I swear to God, I didn't know. But you killed him anyway. Nia wasn't crying. Her face was stone, carved from years of grief and fury. Without asking questions. Without investigating. You put a gun to my father's head and erased the only good man who ever tried to stop your family's evil. Du Hyun fell to his knees among the evidence of his family's sins and his own ignorance. The photographs scattered around him, women's faces, women his brother had treated as merchandise, women his father had allowed to be destroyed. And Dae-young Kim, the traitor who was actually a hero. The thief who'd given everything away to people who needed it more. The father who died begging for mercy from a boy too young and too indoctrinated to grant it. The monster isn't the man who forgot. He could be anything else. Do-hyun's voice broke completely. It's the man who never knew he was a monster to begin with. Nia crouched beside him, surrounded by the truth that had defined both their lives. So what now? Her question was simple, devastating. Now that you know what you really are, now that you know what your family built on the bones of innocent women, what are you going to do about it? Do-hyun looked at the letter on the floor, at his father's lies, at his brother's sins, at the 18 women who'd been saved and the hundreds more still trapped in systems he'd helped maintain. He looked at Nia Jefferson, Dae-young Kim's daughter, the woman who'd saved his life despite everything, the living proof that mercy was stronger. I'm going to burn it all down. His voice was steel and ash. Every part of my family's empire that's built on suffering, every connection to trafficking, every dollar made from human misery. I'm going to finish what your father started. And then I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become the man your father died believing someone could be. Nia's hand found his in the darkness of the storage unit, and they sat together among the evidence of old sins and the possibility of new choices, two people bound by blood and murder and the terrible hope of redemption. They sat in the penthouse as dawn broke over Chicago, the city bathed in gold light that felt like a lie. The boxes from the storage unit covered Do-hyun's dining table, evidence of sins and salvation spread across expensive wood. Nia had made coffee. Do-hyun hadn't touched his. They'd been talking for hours, voices raw from confessions and revelations, picking through the ruins of everything they'd thought they knew. He used to make me breakfast every morning before school. Nia's fingers traced the edge of her father's letter. Kimchi and eggs. He quizzed me on Korean vocabulary while I ate. Present tense, past tense, how to conjugate respect into every sentence. She smiled, broken. I hated it then. Thought it was pointless. American kids didn't need to speak Korean. He was giving you a gift. Do-hyun's voice was hoarse. A piece of home. Something that couldn't be taken away. Except it was taken away. When he died. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed but dry. I stopped speaking Korean for years. Tried to forget every word. But then I'd dream in it. His voice teaching me how to say, I love you, and be careful, and remember where you come from. Do-hyun wanted to apologize again, but apologies felt obscene. Like trying to bandage a severed limb with tissue paper. I don't remember the last thing my brother said to me. Before the accident, he stared at his hands, the hands that had killed Nia's father on his brother's lies. Probably something about business, about expansion, about profit margins built on human suffering I was too blind to see. You were 23. Old enough to ask questions. Old enough to refuse. And he was my father. He should have left before I was born. Should have walked away from that world before dragging a child into it. Nia's voice went soft. We're both living with the choices dead men made. Maybe it's time we made our own. Do-hyun looked at her. This woman who should have killed him, who'd saved him instead, who carried her father's courage like a genetic inheritance. What choice do we make? Before Nia could answer, Do-hyun's phone shattered the fragile peace. Minjun's name flashed on the screen. Boss. Minjun's voice was breathless, panicked. Boss, you need to turn on the news. Now. Do-hyun's hand found the remote. The television blazed to life, showing helicopter footage of flames against pre-dawn darkness. Aurelius was burning. The restaurant where they'd met. Where Nia had served water and swallowed insults. where 3 words in Korean had changed everything. Fire poured from windows like liquid rage, black smoke billowing into the sky. The reporter's voice was clinical, detached. Authorities confirm at least 4 casualties in the suspected arson attack. The victims appear to be restaurant staff who are preparing for the morning shift. Sources suggest this may be gang-related violence. Nia stood so fast her chair fell backward. Marcus. Her voice broke on the name. Marcus was always there early, setting up, making sure everything was perfect. Do-hyun's phone lit up again. A text message. Unknown number.
Your move, Lee.
The Beck family doesn't forget disrespect. Next time, it won't be empty restaurants. Who's the Beck family? Nia's voice was ice. Rival syndicate. Irish-American. We've had territory disputes for years. Do-hyun's jaw clenched. They must think I'm weak.
Distracted.
They're testing boundaries. They killed innocent people. Nia moved to the window, watching smoke rise in the distance. Marcus was 56. He had grandchildren. Carmen just started culinary school. They weren't part of your world. They were just, her voice cracked. They were just trying to survive. I'll handle this. Do-hyun reached for his phone. I'll make the Beck family regret. No. Nia turned, and something in her face made him freeze. It was her father's face. The face in the photograph, smiling with his daughter on his shoulders. The face that had begged for mercy in a warehouse 7 years ago. We'll handle this. Together. Nia, this isn't your fight. Isn't it? She moved to the table, to the boxes of evidence her father had died protecting. My father gathered all this information to save women from trafficking. But these files, she pulled out documents, hands steady despite the fury radiating from her. They connect to other operations. Money laundering, drug distribution, political corruption. This isn't just about your family. It's a network. Do-hyun watched her work, seeing her father in every movement. The same determination. The same refusal to look away from evil just because it was easier. The Beck family is part of it. Nia spread papers across the table.
Look.
Payments. Partnerships. They worked with your brother on the trafficking operation. They're not rivals. They're co-conspirators trying to seize control now that Min-ho is dead. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. His brother's accident. The timing of the Beck family's aggression. The way his father had seemed almost relieved when Min-ho died, like a problem had been solved. They killed my brother. Do-hyun's voice was hollow. And now they're burning down everything connected to me, eliminating witnesses, taking over his operations. So, what are we going to do? Nia's eyes blazed. Run? Hide?
Let them win.
Let Marcus and Carmen and everyone else who died tonight become just another casualty in your world's endless violence. You want revenge. I want justice. She slammed her hand on the table. My father died trying to save people. He died believing one person could make a difference. You killed him because you didn't know any better.
Fine.
You can't undo that. But you can finish what he started. Do-hyun looked at the evidence. At the proof of corruption spreading like cancer through Chicago's power structures. At the woman who'd lost everything and still chose to fight instead of run. If we do this, if we go to war with the Beck family, there's no going back. They'll come for both of us. They'll burn down everything we touch. Let them try. Nia's voice was steel wrapped in silk. My father gave me more than Korean and first aid skills. He gave me his files, his contacts, names of every woman he saved, every witness who saw what your brother and the Beck family did. We have evidence that could destroy them all. Evidence isn't enough. We need to stop thinking like criminals and start thinking like my father did. Nia met his eyes. He didn't just steal money. He documented everything. Built a case. He was going to take it to the FBI before your family found him. Do-hyun felt something shift in his chest. Not redemption, he didn't deserve that. But purpose. Direction. A way to make his brother's death and Dae-young's sacrifice mean something beyond more blood and ashes. Then we finish what he started. He stood, moving to stand beside her. We take down the Beck family. We expose every connection to trafficking, every politician they've bought, every cop on their payroll. We burn down the entire system. And your family? Already dead or complicit. His voice was cold, final. Either way, the Lee Empire ends with me. Nia looked at him for a long moment, measuring, judging, deciding if he meant it, or if this was just another lie from another dangerous man. Then she extended her hand. Partners? Do-hyun took it, their fingers intertwining over evidence of old sins and new possibilities. Partners. Outside, the city burned. Inside, two people bound by murder and mercy began planning a different kind of fire, one that would cleanse instead of destroy, one that would honor the dead by protecting the living. The war had begun. But this time, it wouldn't be fought in shadows. This time, the light would be the weapon. The conference room in Do-hyun's legitimate office building felt like a courtroom. 12 men sat around the table, his father's old guard, men who'd built the Lee Empire with blood and silence. Men who'd looked the other way when women disappeared into warehouses. Do-hyun stood at the head of the table, Nia beside him. Equal. Unflinching. Gentleman. His voice was cold enough to freeze. Let me be clear about the new structure. Anyone involved in human trafficking, directly or indirectly, has 24 hours to leave Chicago. Take your money. Take your connections. But if I find you're still operating, I'll personally deliver you to federal custody with evidence that will bury you for life. The room erupted. Angry Korean, threats veiled and unveiled, accusations of betrayal that sounded like his father's voice echoing from the grave. Park Sung-min, his father's oldest associate, slammed his fist on the table. Your father built this organization on loyalty, and you're destroying it for her. He gestured dismissively at Nia. For her? A waitress? A trader's daughter? Nia didn't flinch. She pulled a folder from her bag, slid it across the table to Park. Open it. Park's hands shook as he revealed photographs. Him, entering a warehouse in Busan. Him, signing off on shipping manifests. Him, counting money stained with women suffering. Dae-young Kim documented everything. Nia's voice was surgical. Before you sent Do-hyun to kill him. Before you buried the evidence of what this organization really was. Every transaction. Every warehouse. Every woman you treated as merchandise. You have copies? Park's face went ash gray. Copies are already with the FBI. Do-hyun's smile was predatory. Sealed, waiting. If anything happens to either of us, they open automatically. But if you leave quietly, cooperate with restructuring, those envelopes stay sealed. You get to live out your retirement in peace. This is extortion.
No.
Nia leaned forward.
This is mercy, which is more than you gave those women.
More than you gave my father. One by one, the men left.
Some with threats.
Most with fear. By evening, the organization that had terrorized Chicago for 30 years was gutted, bleeding leadership like a wounded animal trying to survive. Min-jun entered after the last man departed, carrying a laptop and looking exhausted. Boss, we have a problem. Which one? Do-hyun's laugh was bitter. We have about 12 right now. The Beck family knows you're restructuring. They're accelerating. 3 more businesses connected to you burned last night. No casualties this time, but it's a warning. Let them warn. Nia was studying maps on the wall, warehouse locations, trafficking routes, money laundering operations. She'd marked them with red pins, creating a web that connected to politicians, judges, police departments. We need the witnesses before we move. Without them, it's just documents. Paper doesn't testify. People do. She turned to Do Hyun. My father kept records. Names, addresses, photos of the women he saved. Some might still be at those locations. Some might have moved. But we need to find them. And convince them to testify against the people who traffic them? Minjun's voice was skeptical. They'll be terrified. The Beck family still has reach. Which is why we offer protection. Nia pulled out her phone, showing a contact list she'd built over sleepless nights. I've been in touch with federal prosecutors, victim advocacy groups, immigration lawyers. We're building a network of protection. Safe houses. New identities if they need them. Legal immunity for any crimes they were forced to commit. Do Hyun watched her work with something close to awe. This woman who'd been a waitress 2 weeks ago was now coordinating a takedown that would reshape Chicago's underworld. How long have you been planning this? 7 years. She met his eyes. Since the day my father died. I just didn't have the resources to execute it. Didn't have someone on the inside willing to burn it all down. And now you do. Now we do. The first witness was found in Milwaukee. Lee Sun-hee, 29, working as a nursing assistant under a new name. She'd been 17 when Min-ho Lee's organization trafficked her from Seoul, 19 when Dae-young Kim bought her freedom with stolen money. Nia and Do Hyun drove there together, the car heavy with unspoken tension. Do Hyun wore civilian clothes, jeans, a simple jacket, trying to look less like the man who'd represent everything Sun-hee would fear. Let me talk first. Nia's voice was quiet. She'll trust another woman. Someone who understands. Sun-hee opened her apartment door with the caution of someone who'd learned safety was an illusion. She was small, elegant, with eyes that held the weight of survival. Lee Sun-hee. Nia spoke in gentle Korean. The woman's face went pale. That's not my name anymore. I know.
I'm sorry.
But I'm Nia Jefferson, Dae-young Kim's daughter. The man who saved you. Sun-hee's hand flew to her mouth. Tears spilled instantly. He told me he had a daughter. Showed me your picture. Said he was doing this so you could grow up in a world where men didn't treat women as property. Nia's voice cracked. He died for it. But before he did, he documented everything. And now we have a chance to finish what he started. To make sure no one else goes through what you survived. Who is this? Sun-hee's eyes locked on Do Hyun, and he saw the flash of recognition, the terror. I'm Do Hyun Lee. He stayed in the doorway, non-threatening. Min-ho Lee's brother. I know what my family did. I'm here to help destroy it. You're one of them. I was. The words cost him. I didn't know what they were doing. That's not an excuse. Just a fact. And now I'm using everything I have, money, connections, inside knowledge, to burn down their empire. But we need witnesses. People brave enough to testify. Sun-hee looked between them, the daughter and the brother, both trying to escape the gravity of dead men's sins. If I testify, they'll kill me. If you testify, we'll protect you. Nia pulled out documents. Federal witness protection. New identity. Financial support. Legal representation. And this. She showed Sun-hee a list of names. 17 other women your father saved. We're finding them all. You won't be alone. Sun-hee read the names, her hands trembling. Women who'd shared her nightmare. Women who'd survived because one man chose to be better than the monster he'd been. Will it work? Her voice was barely a whisper. Can you really stop them? Do Hyun spoke, his voice carrying the weight of everything he'd learned. I can't undo what was done to you. I can't give back the years they stole, but I can make sure they never do it again. I can make sure the world knows what they are. And I can make sure every dollar they made from your suffering goes to helping other survivors." Sunhee was quiet for a long time. Then she stepped back, opening her door wider. "Tell me what you need." By the end of the week, they'd found 11 of the 18 women. Each conversation was agony, reopening wounds that had barely scarred over, asking victims to relive trauma for the promise of justice. But they agreed, one by one, because Dae-young Kim's daughter asked them to, because the man who'd saved them deserved to have his sacrifice mean something. Nia coordinated with Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Chen, a prosecutor who'd built her career on taking down organized crime. They met in a secure office downtown, walls covered with evidence that would make headlines for years. "This is unprecedented." Rebecca studied the documents with sharp eyes. "You're handing me cases against the Beck family, the Lee organization, and half of Chicago's political establishment. Can you win?" Do-hyun's question was direct. "With these witnesses? With this documentation? With your testimony?" Rebecca smiled like a shark. "I can bury them all." Nia looked at Do-hyun across the table. Two people who should have been enemies, now partners in dismantling empires built on suffering. "Then let's bury them." Her voice was steady, final. Her father's daughter in every syllable. The strategy was set. The witnesses secured. The evidence compiled. Now came the war. The factory had been dead for 20 years. Rust ate through metal beams like cancer. Broken windows let in Chicago wind that carried the smell of the river and old industry. This was where the Beck family did business that couldn't see daylight, where bodies got buried in concrete, where deals were sealed with blood, where they'd agreed to meet. Nia checked the knife strapped to her thigh one more time. Her father's knife. The one he'd carried for protection, the one that had been returned to her with his belongings after his death. The handle was worn smooth from years of his grip. "You don't have to do this." Do-hyun's voice was tight. He wore a wire under his shirt, FBI listening from 3 blocks away. "I can handle Connor Beck."
No.
Nia's voice was steel. "He burned down Aurelius. He killed Marcus and Carmen. He thinks women are currency and violence is business. This needs to be me. He's expecting me. When you walk in instead, he'll underestimate me." Good. She met Do-hyun's eyes. That's the whole point. They'd chosen this location carefully. Open enough that the FBI could surveil from multiple angles. Isolated enough that Connor Beck would feel safe bringing his real muscle. The trap was set. They just had to spring it without getting killed. Do-hyun's hand found hers. Squeezed once. "Your father would be proud of you." "My father would tell me I'm insane."
She smiled, sharp.
"But he'd understand." She walked into the factory alone. Connor Beck stood in the center of the space, flanked by 6 men in dark clothes. He was tall, red-haired, with the kind of face that suggested violence was recreational. At 45, he'd built his empire on the bones of his competitors and the suffering of people he considered beneath him. Do-hyun Lee. His voice echoed off rusted metal. Finally decided to. He stopped when he saw her. "Where's Lee?" "Busy." Nia kept walking, steady and unhurried, until she was 20 feet away. "So he sent me instead." Connor's laugh was cruel. "The waitress. The little black girl who thinks speaking Korean makes her dangerous." He turned to his men. "Lee sent a woman to negotiate. He really has gone soft." "I'm not here to negotiate." Nia's voice carried across the empty space. "I'm here to inform you that you're finished." "Is that right?" Connor pulled a gun from his jacket, casual as checking his phone. "See, from where I'm standing, you're alone and unarmed in my territory. That doesn't sound like I'm the one who's finished. I'm not alone. Nia smiled. Look up. Connor's eyes flicked upward. LED lights mounted on beams, lights that hadn't been there before. And cameras. 3 of them, professional grade, red recording lights glowing like demon eyes. This conversation is being live-streamed to 4 news outlets, 2 federal agencies, and about 50 lawyers who would love to add your confession to their case files. Nia's voice was conversational. So please keep talking about your territory, about your business, about how you burn down restaurants that won't pay protection money. Connor's face went purple. You're bluffing. Am I? Nia pulled out her phone, showed him the screen. Multiple video feeds, live viewer counts climbing. The world is watching, Connor. Every threat you make, every crime you confess, all recorded, all admissible in court. Kill her. Connor's voice was ice. Kill her now. His men moved, but doors banged open on 3 sides. Federal agents poured in like a flood, weapons drawn, voices overlapping in commands that sounded like thunder. FBI. Hands up. Get on the ground. Connor's men froze, trapped between orders and survival instinct. But Connor Beck wasn't a man who surrendered. He raised his gun, aimed at Nia with the casual certainty of someone who'd killed before and would again. Nia moved. Her father had taught her to fight in the kitchen of their apartment. Practical violence, how to disarm, how to survive, how to win when losing meant death. She closed the distance before Connor could fire, knocked the gun aside with one hand while her other hand pulled the knife from her thigh. They grappled. He was bigger, stronger, trained by decades of brutality. But she was faster, fueled by 7 years of grief and rage, and the memory of her father's voice teaching her that monsters could be stopped if you were brave enough to stand in their way. She swept his legs. He fell hard, cracking his head against concrete. The gun skittered away. She landed on top of him, knife pressed to his throat hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. This is for Marcus. Her voice was barely a whisper. And Carmen. And my father. And every woman you trafficked. Every life you destroyed. Connor smiled through bloody teeth. Do it. Prove you're just like me. The knife pressed harder. It would be so easy. One quick motion and Connor Beck would bleed out on the factory floor, justice served in the oldest way humanity knew. But Nia heard her father's voice. Monsters are only men who forgot they could be anything else. She heard Du Hyun's voice. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become the man your father died believing someone could be. She heard her own voice from a lifetime ago, standing in a restaurant, refusing to be silent.
No.
Nia pulled the knife back, though her hand shook with the effort of restraint. I'm nothing like you, because I choose to be better. She stood, stepped back, let the FBI swarm over Connor Beck like ants over a dying thing. Rebecca Chin appeared beside her, professional and precise. We have everything we need. The live stream, the recordings, the evidence you provided. Connor Beck will spend the rest of his life in federal prison. And the others? Nia's voice was numb. The rest of his organization? 23 arrests already in progress. By morning, the Beck family will cease to exist as a criminal enterprise. Rebecca's smile was sharp. You did this. You and your father's documentation. You brought down an empire. Du Hyun emerged from the shadows, and Nia walked to him on legs that wanted to collapse. He caught her, held her steady while federal agents secured the scene and Connor Beck screamed threats that no longer mattered. You chose justice. Du Hyun's voice was soft, wondering. Even when revenge was right there. My father died trying to save people. Nia looked at the knife in her hand, her father's knife, now marked with Connor Beck's blood, but not his death. He wouldn't want me to become a killer, even of someone who deserved it. You're stronger than I ever was.
No.
She looked up at him. I just had a better teacher. They walked out of the factory together, leaving behind the ruins of the Beck family and the ghost of who Nia might have become if she'd chosen the easy path of violence over the harder path of mercy. Outside, Chicago's night was cold and clear. Sirens wailed in the distance. News helicopters circled overhead. The story was breaking across every channel. Organized crime brought down by a waitress and a mafia boss who turned on his own family. Nia took a deep breath of clean air, felt the knife's weight in her hand, and knew her father would rest easier now. Not because Connor Beck was arrested, but because his daughter had looked evil in the face and chosen to defeat it without becoming it. What now? Do-hyun asked. Nia thought about Marcus and Carmen, about Sun-hee and the other survivors, about her father bleeding out in a warehouse while begging for his daughter's safety, about the empire they'd dismantled and the lives they'd saved and the justice that finally had teeth. Now we rebuild.
Her voice was steady, certain.
Her father's daughter in every word. We rebuild everything they burned, and we make it better than it was before. Behind them, Connor Beck was loaded into a federal vehicle. His reign of terror ended not by a bullet, but by the courage of people who refused to let evil win. The factory stood empty again, silent, waiting for Rust to finish what time had started. But the two people who walked away from it carried something Rust could never touch, the knowledge that choosing justice over revenge was the hardest, bravest thing anyone could do. And they'd done it together. The restaurant smelled like fresh paint and possibility. 6 months had passed since the factory. 6 months since Nia had chosen justice over blood, since she'd handed over the rival boss to the FBI instead of ending him herself. 6 months of rebuilding everything. The restaurant, Do-hyun's empire, herself. The original Palazzo Nero had burned to ash. The new space was 3 blocks north, smaller, deliberately transparent. Floor-to-ceiling windows replaced the old velvet darkness. Natural light flooded the dining room during the day, and at night, soft amber lamps created warmth without mystery. There were no back corners where deals happened in shadows. No private booths where power operated unseen. The menu was the same caliber, Michelin star quality, but the clientele had shifted. Journalists sat at tables next to lawyers. Business owners dined beside prosecutors. The place had become what Do-hyun had only pretended it was before, legitimate. Nia stood in the center of the dining room, watching contractors put the final touches on the memorial wall. It was marble, pale and clean, and etched into it were the names of 16 women, the victims from the trafficking ring. Her father's name was there too, not as a victim, but as a liberator. Below the names was a single line. They were seen. They were honored. They were not forgotten. It's perfect. Do-hyun's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him in a charcoal suit, expensive, but not black, not intimidating. He'd changed the way he dressed, the way he moved, the way he held power. It was still there, still unmistakable, but it no longer announced itself like a weapon. He slid his hand into hers. The gesture was still new enough to feel significant. Your father would have wanted it this way, he said. Nia looked back at the wall, at her father's name carved into marble. For 15 years, he'd existed only in her memory. In the Busan dialect she'd guarded like a secret, in the money hidden in accounts she didn't even know existed until his lawyer found them. Now he existed here, in public, in truth. He would have wanted you to be legitimate, Nia said quietly. He died trying to protect people from your family. And now you're the one running a legitimate business. I think he'd find that redemptive. Do-hyun didn't argue. He'd stopped arguing about redemption months ago, sometime between the factory and the day he dissolved his connections to every criminal enterprise his family had built. It hadn't been quick. It hadn't been clean. But it had been thorough. The foundation offices were across the street, a converted brownstone that used to house a law firm. Nia spent her mornings there, managing the money her father had hidden away. Millions of dollars, accumulated through careful planning and impossible sacrifice. Now it funded safe houses, legal representation, and recovery programs for trafficking survivors. The first case she'd taken on was one of the women her father had saved. A woman named Keisha, who'd spent 3 years rebuilding her life in silence. When Nia had found her through the federal records, Keisha had wept on the phone. Not from trauma, but from the realization that someone finally knew, that someone finally cared. That was the work now. Knowing, caring, rebuilding what her father had started. Do-hyun walked with her to the restaurant's new kitchen, where the head chef was conducting inventory. The kitchen gleamed, stainless steel, efficiency, no shadows. Everything visible, everything accountable. The permits came through today, Do-hyun said. The second location in Milwaukee. Same model. Legitimate business, community connection, no back rooms. Nia nodded. After Chicago, there would be other cities, other restaurants, other ways to launder legitimacy through the spaces where Do-hyun had once laundered crime. She understood the symmetry of it, the use of infrastructure for good instead of evil. Her father had understood it too. He'd been working within the system to dismantle it from inside. Now Do-hyun was doing the same thing, but he was doing it from the outside, building something clean from the ground up. I got a call from one of the survivors, Nia said. She's ready to give her testimony. She said she's ready because she knows her story will actually matter now, that it won't disappear. Do-hyun pulled her close. In the kitchen, with the chef pretending not to notice, with the afternoon light streaming through the windows, he kissed her forehead. Your father died, so that stories like hers wouldn't disappear, he said. And now you're making sure they don't. That night, after the contractors left and the restaurant fell silent, Nia stood alone in the dining room. She looked at her father's name on the marble wall. She looked at the empty tables, ready for tomorrow's service. She looked at the windows, transparent and honest. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was seen. The city knew her name. She'd testified before federal prosecutors. She'd been interviewed by journalists. She'd become the face of her father's legacy. Do-hyun found her there, standing in the amber lamplight. Come home, he said. But Nia didn't move.
Not yet.
She was reading the inscription again, reading her father's name in marble, reading the promise she'd made to him in that storage unit when she'd found his letter. I see you, she whispered to the wall, to the past, to the ghost of a man who'd sacrificed everything so she could have a future. And tomorrow, when the restaurant opened, everyone who dined there would see him too. Do-hyun waited. He understood that some moments required patience. He'd learned that from her, from watching her rebuild herself, from watching her transform grief into purpose, from watching her choose to see beauty in the ruins instead of drowning in the ashes. Finally, Nia turned away from the wall. She took his hand. Let's go home, she said. And together, they walked out into the Chicago night, where the city still breathed, still moved, still lived, but now it was a city that would remember the names of the forgotten. The restaurant glowed like it was holding its breath. String lights draped across the ceiling in delicate constellations. Every table was set with white linens and pale roses. The dining room hummed with conversation. Journalists, prosecutors, survivors, and the handful of legitimate business owners who'd chosen to rebuild alongside Do-hyun instead of retreating into the old networks. The air smelled like possibility and expensive champagne. Nia moved through the crowd in a midnight blue dress that caught the light like water. Her father's watch was clasped around her wrist, the one he'd hidden in the storage unit along with the letter and the evidence. She'd had it restored. It kept perfect time now. The women were seated at the best table, positioned near the memorial wall. Keisha was there, laughing at something one of the other survivors had said. There was Maria, who'd spent 5 years in captivity before Nia's father had orchestrated her escape. There was Jasmine and Sarah and 12 others, each one a life her father had valued more than his own. Do-hyun had insisted on this. Not just the memorial plaque, not just the foundation, but this, gathering them in public, honoring them in a room full of witnesses, making their existence undeniable, making their survival matter. Nia had thought the gala was meant to celebrate the restaurant's official opening. She'd worn the blue dress for that. She'd prepared remarks about her father and Do-hyun's transformation. She'd planned to thank the prosecutors and the federal agents who'd helped bring down the rival syndicate. She hadn't expected the empty table. It was set for 2, the corner table where Do-hyun had insulted her, where she'd responded in Busan Korean, where everything had shattered and reformed into something neither of them could have predicted. The table was arranged exactly as it had been that night 6 months ago. White linens. A single candle. The place settings precise and deliberate. Do-hyun appeared at her elbow, his hand warm against the small of her back. "Come with me," he said. The room had begun to quiet. Nia realized then that this was planned. The gala wasn't about the opening. It was about this moment. Everyone had been waiting for it. She let him lead her to the corner table. When she sat, she could see the memorial wall from her chair. She could see her father's name. She could see the faces of the women he'd saved, all watching with the kind of attention reserved for moments that changed the trajectory of lives. Do-hyun remained standing. 6 months ago, he said, his voice carrying across the silent restaurant, a woman challenged me in a language I thought I'd buried. She looked me in the eye when I'd spent my entire life training people to look away. She spoke truth to power in a dialect that belonged to my childhood, to my grandmother, to the part of me I'd tried to kill. He paused. The room was absolutely still. I should have killed her for that. By every rule I lived by, I should have. Instead, I became obsessed with understanding her. And in trying to understand her, I discovered who I actually was beneath all the violence, all the silence, all the blood. Nia's chest tightened. She could feel Keisha watching from the other table. Could feel all of them watching, the women, the prosecutors, the journalists documenting this moment for the world to see. Do-hyun reached into his jacket. For a moment, Nia's body tensed with old instinct, the muscle memory of a woman who'd lived in fear. But what he pulled out was a small velvet box. "Nia Jefferson," he said, and the use of her full name felt sacred. "You taught me that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about honoring it. It's about choosing to build something worthy of the sacrifices made for us." He opened the box. The diamond caught the candlelight and threw it back in fractured pieces of light. "Marry me. Not because it erases what I've done. Not because it makes me a good man. But because together, we can make sure that the blood spilled matters. That your father's death wasn't just tragedy, it was transformation. It was the beginning of a world where trafficking victims are seen, where heroes are honored, where the circle of vengeance is finally broken." Nia couldn't speak. Her hands were shaking. She was aware of Keisha rising from her table, of the other women standing, of journalists recording, of prosecutors nodding with the satisfaction of people who'd helped engineer a future that looked nothing like the past. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Do-hyun asked, and there was something raw in his voice, the vulnerability of a man learning to need, to hope, to believe in futures other than the ones carved out by blood and bullets. Yes, Nia said louder.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd had months to learn her measurements, her preferences, the way she moved through the world. He'd learned her the way a man learns to live after nearly dying. The restaurant erupted. Not in applause exactly, but in something deeper, the sound of witnesses to transformation, of people who understood that what they were seeing was the end of one story and the beginning of another. 6 months later, on a day when the Chicago wind carried the scent of Lake Michigan and something like redemption, they married in the restaurant. The ceremony was small. The women her father had saved stood as witnesses. Do-hyun's legitimate business associates, the prosecutors, a handful of journalists, they were all there to see two people who'd learned to love each other across the wreckage. After the vows, after the first kiss that tasted like tears and possibility, they walked together to the memorial wall. Do-hyun carried a small bronze plaque. The inscription read, Park Min-jun Jefferson. He chose to see the invisible. He chose to save the forgotten. He chose love over legacy. He broke the circle of vengeance. He is remembered as a hero. As they hung it next to the names of the women he'd saved, Nia placed her hand over Do-hyun's on the bronze. He would be proud, she whispered. So would I, Do-hyun said. Of both of you. And in the Chicago night, in a city that remembered, in a restaurant full of light and truth, the cycle finally ended. Not with violence. Not with revenge. With love. With honor. With the profound, unshakable knowledge that some sacrifices are so powerful they reshape worlds. What started as 3 words spoken in a language no one expected her to know became a story about breaking cycles. About choosing redemption over revenge. About the kind of love that doesn't erase your past, it transforms it. Nia's father died, so strangers could live. And she spent 15 years running from that truth until the day she decided to run toward it instead. Do-hyun was supposed to be the villain. He was supposed to be the untouchable mafia boss. But what happens when the person you're supposed to fear is actually just a man who forgot he could be anything other than what violence taught him to be? This is what real transformation looks like. Not redemption arcs that ignore the blood spilled. Not love stories that pretend the past doesn't matter. But two people who look directly at what was broken and choose to rebuild it into something that honors every sacrifice made to get there. And here's what I love most about this story. It doesn't end with them riding off into the sunset. It ends with them installing a plaque. With them making sure that the women her father saved will never be forgotten. With them taking everything they learned in the darkness and building light that other people can actually see. That's the kind of love story that matters. That's the kind of story that lingers. Now here's where I need you. If this story hit you, if Nia's 3 words still echoing in your head, if you're thinking about what it means to break the circle of vengeance, if you're sitting with the question of what redemption actually looks like, I need you to do something. First, drop a comment. Tell me, what would you have done in that restaurant? Would you have spoken up? Would you have swallowed the insult? Don't think too hard. Just tell me what your gut says. The comment section is where the real conversation happens, and I want to hear from you. Second, share this story. Send it to someone who needs to see that redemption is possible. Send it to someone you know who's struggling with their past, who's convinced they can't change, who thinks the circle will never break. Sometimes we need to see someone else's transformation to believe in our own. Third, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because next week, I'm bringing you a story about a woman who faked her own death to escape her abusive marriage and the detective who had to decide whether to turn her in or protect her. The moral questions in that one?
They're going to haunt you.
You don't want to miss it. And if you want the full written story, the unabridged version with all the conversations, all the internal dialogue, all the moments I couldn't fit into this video, the link is in the description. It's free. It's yours. Read it before bed. Read it on your commute. But read it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching stories about people who choose differently. Thank you for believing that transformation is possible. I'll see you next week. Stay curious. Stay compassionate. And remember, the circle only breaks if someone chooses to step outside it.